Good morning, Coretta.
Good morning, Claudine.
Hi, Ron and Debbie.
Hi, Claudine.
Good morning. How are you guys?
We're good. We're good. How are you? Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you and to everybody. Only a few days to go. Hope everybody has their shopping done. You know, I always have Amazon to the rescue, thankfully. Trying to figure out what to get people. But I'm so glad you guys are here today. I am so excited to share all of these fantastic little finds in this museum that probably not many people have gone to, but I want to implore upon you that you need to visit this museum when you go to Paris, because as you could tell from this photo, nobody is really there. And it is absolutely fantastic and has so many fantastic little things. If you like architecture or the heritage of France, this is the place for you. Or you love history. I love this place. And as you could tell, it's this really cool spot as well. So it's just me today. So you could just keep your screen on the speaker, I guess is what it is, because Kate is in New York, and a week from right here at this very moment, I should be on a plane. So I'm very excited. So this, everybody, I'll go ahead and get started. We'll see if anybody else pops in here. This museum here is the Architecture and Patrimoine. So it's a Cité de l'Architecture et Patrimoine in Paris, and it's at the Trocadero. I'm going to put a whole thing on my website later today, and also have this in my newsletter with, I'll put links in there and all of the info of when it's open and everything, but it's in the Trocadero. And so if you've ever been to the Trocadero to go look at the Eiffel Tower, which I'm sure most everybody has, because it's one of the great places to see it, you're standing there looking at the Eiffel Tower, and on either side of you are two big buildings that are identical. The one to the left of you, as you look at the Eiffel Tower, is this museum. And the one on the right is the Museum of Man. I have still yet to go inside there. It has actually been closed for a little bit. It's supposed to reopen. I think like this week was reopening after some renovations. So I will go check that out, because there was a cool exhibit coming up there about, it was all a bunch of drawings of famous Parisians and French people that lived in France, including French people, including Picasso and Josephine Baker. Both, of course, not French, but in their hearts they were. So we'll go ahead and get started on this, because I was so excited the first time I found some of these little pieces at this museum, and it was in 2019 after my favorite weekend, the Patrimoine weekend. That's always the third weekend in September, which if you love anything that's French history and you want to get into buildings you normally can't go, that is that's the museum that you want to see, or that the weekend you want to see, because it opens all these places open, including, you know, Élysée Palace and the Palais Royal, all these cool places that you don't normally get to go see. And so that one, it was the September right after the fire, and they had at the Palais Royal, which is the Minister of Culture is there as well. They had a couple of the pieces from the roof of Notre Dame. So, and since obviously we know what happened to the roof, it was a great stroke of luck that we'll get into. But the museum itself, it actually dates back much farther. In 1795, one of my heroes, Alexander Lenoir, decided that he wanted to do all he could to save save the different monuments of Paris and of France during the revolution, because as we know, they were going through and trying to destroy different churches and anything that was a monarchy. And one of those biggest places that they destroyed was they went to the Basilique Saint-Denis, just north of Paris, where all of the kings and queens are buried. They ripped open all of the tombs and stole anything that they could, because a lot of times royals were buried with gems and jewelry. And so they opened all of them and basically threw the bones into two pits. They were nice enough to have a pit for the Valois family and a pit for the Bourbon family. So at least they sort of kept it somewhat together. But Alexander Lenoir was very smart, and he went up there and he was like, we have to save these things. So he saved all of the tombs. So now today, when you go to the Basilique, which you definitely should, because it's a fantastic, amazing place to visit, we have all those things now because of Alexander Lenoir. So he's one of my favorite heroes. But he decided to open up the Museum of French Monuments, and that originally was at where we have the École des Beaux-Arts now. And so it stayed there until 1815, and then it closed. And then Viollet-le-Duc, who is a name that's going to come up a lot this morning, he was the one who decided they needed to resurrect that idea and have another museum dedicated to the different monuments of France. And that is when they found this spot in the Trocadero after the Universal Exhibition. And so it was wide open here and ready to go in 1878. They moved into this space, and it was a dream of Viollet-le-Duc to have this spot here. And as you can see, it's pretty fantastic with the ironwork up on top of the building and all of the beautiful red walls that you basically make all these things just jump out. What you see is that a lot of these are casts that are made from the originals that are on a lot of different churches, especially this space right here is pretty much all churches. And so they're cast, some of them are casts, and some of them are actual pieces from the different structures. And so there's over 350 in there now. They have about 3,000. So we're only seeing, a little over a tenth of what is actually there. So it is pretty fantastic. So we will go, and we're going to jump in here. If you look over here to the right, you might notice let's see if I can get to the next picture here. So this, our man that we were just mentioning, Viollet-le-Duc, this is Viollet-le-Duc right here. And Viollet-le-Duc was a self-taught, basically, architect. His parents wanted him to go to the École des Beaux-Arts, but he didn't want to because he wanted to be an architect. So he's just kind of started working with his uncle that was working with the monuments of Paris, and he just kind of followed him around. He was selected to do the renovation of the Sainte-Chapelle, which is also on Ile de la Cité. And so when it came up to the idea that they were going to redo Notre Dame, Mr. Viollet-le-Duc entered into the competition and was chosen to be the guy to do that. And this is a really cool bust of him. It was done by Adolphe Victor Geoffroy Duchamp. He was another name that's going to come up quite a bit because he was the one that did a lot of the statues that we're specifically here to see today. But he did this of him. And then down at the bottom of it is that is him hard at work. That's him at his desk. In his office, hard at work, doing the different pieces that he was doing. He did a lot more in France other than Notre Dame and Sainte-Chapelle. He did Carcassonne. He was involved with a whole bunch of different special monuments and churches and everything around France. I've written about him a couple times. I'll put a link to those when I find them. When I do the little recap on my website and in my newsletter. So this is really cool. And I, of course, you'll see how many pictures I took of this. There was even more, but this is really cool because this is what Notre Dame looked like before Viollet-le-Duc started the renovation. This is a model created in 1862, and it shows it before. So you'll notice down here up above the doors, you do not see the kings there because they were the kings of Judah. They were torn down, as we know, during the revolution because they thought they were the kings of the monarchy. So they ripped those down, put ropes around their necks and pulled them down, and then stonecutters were there and chopped their heads off. But we have most of those heads now in the Musée de Cluny, which should reopen after a long renovation next spring, this coming spring. So cross our fingers for that. But it's pretty cool because if you look through it, you could actually see on the side, and you also notice there's no spire there too. So the front entrance here, you see something that might be a little bit different. It's that center one that is the door of the Last Judgment. There is usually the trameau that goes into the center of the door, and you see it on either door on either side of it, but it is missing on this one. And that was because in 1756, the architect Soufflot, who also did the Pantheon, he decided to have it taken out so that they could have their huge processions go in and out of that front door. And so it was recreated and returned under Viollet-le-Duc. But here it shows that it's not there. And here's a closer view of the fact that the kings are missing, sadly. But it's pretty cool because you could see, right, you could see also just how amazing this building is. And then the church right behind it, the model right behind it, that is Saint-Chapelle. So these are both little Viollet-le-Duc things. But what's also really interesting, if you look in this picture on the bottom right-hand side, that was Soufflot's addition of the treasury that was there. That is now gone. But if you look at the edge of the building, he decided to sign the end of the building, 2 stories, with the map of the interior of Notre Dame, which is really cool. And I didn't even know, I don't think I even noticed that when I was there. I noticed it in the pictures, which then it's like, well, now I just have to go back. So, but you see the rose windows here, and then the other side is even cooler. Here's a close-up. This model is absolutely amazing. Like, can I have this? And I could have it as my little French dollhouse. Here is, and this is the chapel of this is the entry of the Virgin. And so this is this has her whole story up there, and this model is absolutely stunning because of how detailed it is, and the doors and everything. It's pretty amazing. I will put pictures. I should put a picture on my website side by side of this with what it actually looks like. But it's pretty astonishing. And that is the chapel. That is the Porte de Saint-Anne, which is the Mother of Mary. And then this is in through the side. So when you walk around the other side of the model, you get to look straight in through, and you could even see there that there's the paintings are hanging there, and those paintings are called the Lemais. And there's a few of those I have at the end of this. And we actually I did a whole podcast episode coming out in 2 weeks about a lot of these paintings that you could find in the churches. But it's pretty stunning to look in through the side. And then I got down as close as I could to look in through there. And this was before 1708. This in 1708 is when Louis XIV commissioned an architect named Robert de Cotte to create a new choir. So when you were in Notre Dame, you normally couldn't see across through here like this. And so this was when he added that whole entire back part of the choir, which in there is where they have those 3 amazing statues, the one of the Pietà, and then it's the vow of Louis XIV. So you see Louis XIII or Louis XIII and Louis XIV there, and one of them's offering his crown to the Virgin, and that was his vow that he said that he would do this to the church of the country for Paris. And so this was before that. This model was created without that in there. So, and then here is the very back of it. So you can see that sacristy and the treasury that was there, that was removed, that was taken down, and Viollet-le-Duc added his own little one in there. But you could also see that's another church that's just outside of Paris as well on the other side. But it is pretty cool. And then they have, this is a great way to see the differences between what the church originally looked like before Viollet-le-Duc. And of course, it did not have the spire on there. And then this is this really great little example, and this will be come in handy. A lot of these things, that they have, and thankfully so much of this has been documented. When Viollet-le-Duc was actually redoing Notre Dame, when he was redoing all these statues, when he redid the statues of the kings that were on the facade, they luckily had drawings of all of these things from before. Also with the interior, with it, when you would go into the chapels, and some of them are just like beautifully painted on the walls. Those are all things that he had the notes and everything from before. And so he ended up being able to recreate those things from that. He also designed all of the stained glass, most of the stained glass windows that weren't the ones that were previously done in the 13th century. And he has drawings of all those. I have a really neat book that has just, it's just basically it kind of looks like a color book that's all been colored in. And it's just all of his designs for each one of the individual chapels, which is really cool. So he was pretty amazing. But these things come in handy because they're redoing all those. And just about every other day on French news, they keep talking about the different huge timbers that they're finding all over France and shaping and getting ready to send them up to Paris to be used again in the rebuilding of Notre Dame, which it should be starting soon. So yeah, it does look like a Christmas tree. So one of the things that when on that horrible day of April 15th, 2019, as I saw the spire going up in flames, I was very distraught because of the rooster that sat on the top of it. And I love the story of the rooster. And I used to always write about it and share it on my Instagram, and it really never got a lot of attention. And I was like, come on, people, like, this is so cool. Do you know what's inside of this? This is like this coolest thing, looking over the city. So once it fell, and sadly, then everybody, then they started talking about the story, and then finally the rooster got the appreciation that it deserved. But in this, what's really cool about this museum is there's all of these, and I didn't even put all of them into this. There are all of these sketches and drawings, and some of them these are the original ones that the architects and the different designers used. But this was an actual drawing done by Duchamp of what the design of the rooster that was going to be put on the top of the building. And the rooster, it's kind of a take because it was Gaul. France at one point was Gaul, and it's a take on the word Gaul. So that's why you see the rooster on a lot of things, but you see him on a lot of churches other than just Notre Dame. You can see it around. And then this is an actual photo of the little beauty, and he's here in the museum now, so you'll get to see him. But this, I was just freaking out when I saw this. I thought this was just the coolest thing. This wonderful little drawing of what it was going to look like up there. And here he is. This is how he survived. He ended up falling. So as the spire fell, and it fell into what was left of the burning timbers, fell into the church, broke through the roof of the transept. I was just like, oh, he's gone. I mean, it was so hot. I was like, there's no way he survived. And the next day there was a picture of the fact that he was being found in the rubble, being held by one of my other loves, Philippe Villeneuve, who is the head architect. That he was the head architect before the fire, was working on the renovations of the church. And now he has an even bigger job ahead of him. But he was found, and this is what he is, a little bit beat up, a little worse for wear, but he was designed in 1858. He was placed up on top of the spire on June 22nd, 1859. He weighed 66 pounds, which he doesn't really, he doesn't look that big. But it was originally, there was a ball below that. You could kind of see that in the picture behind it of the spire, kind of where the circle is. That was originally where these relics were held. The relics then moved in the 1930s and 1935. They were moved and placed inside of the rooster. And these relics were a piece of the crown of thorns, a relic of Saint Denis, who was the patron saint of Paris, the one that had his head chopped off and he carried it, and a piece of the reliquary of Saint Geneviève. And Saint Geneviève is also the patron saint of Paris. And I did a two-part episode of the podcast coming up in January, which would be on her feast day on January 3rd. And she was amazing. And I spent about a week and a half doing research on her, and we probably could have done 4 episodes. But these reliquaries were inside of here. So I was just, that's why I think it's just the coolest thing. And high above, high above the city of Paris, here's these, 2 people that are the patron saints of Paris watching over it. And Saint Geneviève, who was absolutely fantastic. She, while she was alive, she saved Paris from Attila the Hun. Then she saved it from famine. And then after she died, many times, over 100 different times, her reliquary was brought out in a huge procession that they do down in Notre Dame, which is a whole nother story, which is really interesting. And there would be, they'd bring her out because it was flooding. She'd come out, it stopped raining. They'd bring her out because it was raining or was dry and people were starving. And they'd take her back to the church. And as she was taken back in the church, the sky opened up and just started raining on everybody. So she multiple times has saved Paris. So I think because she was up there, that is why it was all up to her that we say that Notre Dame didn't completely perish. But you can see this side, he's a little bit more built up than he was on the other one. But you can see on here, it was originally coated in gold. It was gold gilded. And so when you get really close, you could kind of still see a little bit of where that gold remains and on his little tail. But he's kind of flat. But it's so amazing to get to be able to see these things up close, because, even when it was on top of the spire and it's, 96 meters over the ground, even with a telephoto lens on my camera, I still could never get close enough to really look at it. So unfortunately, it's horrible circumstances, but it's an amazing opportunity to be able to get to see this. And all of these things should still be here until they get back onto the roof of Notre Dame. So it could be 2024 or even later. And there he is. There's Philippe Villeneuve, who's holding, when I saw this picture, I literally cried. I was so happy to see that he survived. Oops, we got a bigger one of him right there. And you could see them pointing inside of it. But I was thrilled to pieces to see that he made it out alive. And also here, you see this really cool model of what the spire actually looked like. And they will be rebuilding the spire it was voted on that it had to be created back into the same exact likeness, which thank goodness. We can't say so much for the inside. There's a little bit of a discussion going on of how they want to change the inside, and then it was leaked out in the press that it was going to be like Disneyland, and everybody, including myself, was not happy about that. So, but they're supposed to be keeping a lot of the things, the statues are all staying in and the paintings, but they're going to try to update some things. So we'll see. Some things, it dates back to, the 9th century. Let's just leave it alone. Some things don't need to be changed, right? And then, so you could see, so these, with an amazing stroke of luck, on April 11th, 2019, they took all of the statues off of the roof. Thank God, because we would not be talking about this today if not. I do not think that they would have survived like the rooster did, because they just would have been in that constant, in constant, a lot more heat. Right here, and the internal structure of these, they're not all fully bronze, or a copper, which I was kind of surprised of when I first originally heard. I thought they were these very huge, very heavy statues. So you have all of these, they line up here, and there is 16 of them. There's the 12 apostles, and then there's the 4 figures that are at the bottom of each. And I love that one. And you even have like, you have all these really cool drawings that they have. I mean, how amazing is that? I just, when I go to these things and I come across these for the first time, I'm just constantly like, oh my God, I get so excited. But you can see how they're all lined up and they're very, very patinaed. But they're standing there on these little columns. And they're actually much lighter than you would think. This is actually the drawing of how they had them laid out. They constantly kept changing them, including changing things the morning of that they were actually going to be put in place. So this old handwriting sometimes is very difficult to read. I was trying to get the exact, I'm going to have to go back and just do this with my own two eyes and really look at it. But it is very difficult. I cannot, and I have an entire shelf of Notre Dame books. Most of them are all in French about the architecture and everything. None of them talk about the statues. None of them have the list of these are the statues. If you look up the apostles online, sometimes there's different ones that are here. So it was not an easy task. Luckily, I take 1,000 pictures and make so many notes when I was there. But so here they are. So the first one is St. Peter, which even if you, and I'm not Catholic, so I have just learned over time who all these guys are, but some of them are very easy to spot because of this guy always has a key. So St. Peter or Saint Pierre, that's always his attribute, is always usually a key, sometimes two keys. You see him in just about every church in Paris. Usually there's in Saint-Sulpice and also Saint-Germain-des-Prés. They're very large statues of him sitting there. And so they are, it's always kind of fun to start to try to figure out who all these guys are. And I have a whole list that I keep trying to find. Some of them their attributes always aren't with them. Saint Geneviève usually has a lamb with her. Sometimes if it's older, she has a candle. So it kind of depends on what you're looking at and where, and sometimes they don't put the attributes there at all. So then it gets even harder. So, they're just a bunch of guys with beards. So he is, when they created these statues, there was basically 4 different body types that they used. And so they did that to keep it a little easier. And then the head and the hands and the attributes would change. So, but you don't really look at, when you see them, you don't think, oh, this guy looks just like the last one I saw. They're all a little bit different. And so it is pretty cool because they do some of them do have the attribute. So the spire was imagined by Viollet-le-Duc, and he originally planned in his drawings that they would put 2 spires on the roof. And obviously we know that did not happen. And so there was just the one. The original spire that was dated to the 13th century was taken down in 1797 because it was actually a bell tower as well, and it had been damaged in the winds. And so it was very dangerous because it had these very heavy bells inside of the spire. So it was removed. So Parisians were used to seeing the church without a spire for, 70, 80 years. And so it wasn't until, the 1860s that it was added back on there. So they decided that they wanted to have these apostles lining the church, looking up towards at the spire. Only one of them looks at the spire. The rest of them look down to the city. But again, Adolphe Duchamp actually worked on the statues. In 1848, he started with the drawings. And there was that one drawing I showed you, which is definitely changed because there's not one that's in that pose. But he designed all the statues and the roosters. They aren't all they aren't just solid. And so in it, and I have a photo of it, they have an internal structure that is actually it's iron. And then outside of it, these are basically just sheets of the copper that was attached to it and placed in there. So they're actually not as heavy as you would think. them if they were solid, and their heads all come off of it. So when they were taken off of Notre Dame, there was these pictures of these headless statues being pulled off of the roof with these huge cranes. And so they're covered with copper. It was actually the Durand Plumbing Company that was the one that actually constructed them. And then later the Mondoui Company did it. They had also done all the ones of the apostles going up the spire of Saint-Chapelle as well, which they had just done right before that. And these were installed on March 23rd, 1861. So they were up there for quite some time before they thankfully, with just such a huge stroke of luck, ended up coming off of there, for goodness sakes, thank you. But that, of course, is St. Peter. Here we have what that's Saint Andrew, and there is his head coming off. And that had to be quite the amazing sight to see these. It was quite the buzz, of course, everywhere, that these were coming off of the roof and flying through, and just, again, thank goodness that they came off when they did. And then here you could see where they have the actual interior structure. So it really isn't very thick. They have that iron there, and a lot of it had been pretty damaged because water had gotten through some of the pieces of the coating that was open. And so they had to, on some of these, they had to basically only 20% of them, the interior structure was okay. So they had to redo all of them. And you can see in the background, you could see the picture of the rooster. Also, that in this fall of 2019 at the Palais Royal, where they had this, I should have put some of those pictures in here. They had the actual gentlemen that are working on, that did these. They had like the actual craftsmen. And I just, again, was just fascinated to see them. So here's another one where you could see it a little bit better. So it really is rather thin. And here they are all lined up. So that you could also, this is a great way to see how massive they are. They are really very large. And they're all their heads down there. Just a little bit strange. And here they are again with other statues. And so the plan is they were going to work on these. It took a month to do each one of them. And the plan was they were going to bring them back 2 by 2 to Notre Dame and set them up so people could see them prior to being put back up onto the roof. And of course, that plan changed. I kind of like them with the patina. So this is where they are when they are all nice and cleaned. They ended up, it was quite the different sort of technique that they did. They were taken down to a company called SOCRA, and they do renovations and restorations on all sorts of pieces of art. They did a bunch of stuff at the Samaritan, a lot of those iron railings and stuff. They did all of those as well. But when they did this, they ended up using a micro sandblasting, and it was apricot powder to completely get rid of like the outer layer of the damage on the statues. And then they ended up painting it to this darker brown color. And this is the color that they originally were. I kind of like them as the patina green better, but I'm not going to complain. I'm happy to see them. So they were completely cleaned up this way. And they, as you can see, they look very, very different, but they are all nice and shiny and new. They painted them, and then they covered it with wax to keep it all protected. And so now this is them in their glorious little state. But it took a month for them to do it. On June 29, 2021, of just this year, they all arrived back at the Architecture Museum. So when I saw them in January of 2020, they didn't have any of the statues there. They did have the angel, which we'll see, and they had the rooster. The angel was all wrapped up in cellophane and kind of hiding in the corner, but it wasn't really, like, you could still see it. And so nobody was there. So I walked up and touched it, wrapped up in plastic. I thought, what's the chance I get to have to touch the statue that goes onto the top of Notre Dame. But it was wrapped in plastic, so it wasn't too dangerous. So the next one we have is, this is Saint Matthew, and you'll see with each one of them is a little bit different. This is Saint Matthew. He was a tax collector and a customs officer. He left to follow Jesus, and he wrote the first gospel. And so that's why he gets to have a book there, because he wrote one of the gospels. And he is, and it was one of my favorite things to do with the saints, is to see who they're the patron saint of. And for a bunch of, some of them have like the longest list, but I picked out some of I think kind of some are fun, pretty funny. But he was a patron saint of accountants, Italy, and perfume makers. So he must have smelled pretty good there. And this guy here is St. Andrew. St. Andrew, and if you are Scottish, or you will know St. Andrew as well. St. Andrew was a fisherman. He would fish on the banks of the Tiber, and he was one of the first disciples of Jesus. He was martyred, sentenced to death, and he was going to be crucified on a cross. And he said he did not want the same shape of cross as Christ had. He wanted a different cross, and so they did this one that looks like an X. That was a cross, but he, instead of being nailed to it or tied to it, he like miraculously attached to the cross. There's a lot of paintings of him you could find in different places of him attached to the cross, and it's pretty horrific to think. But you will know that if the cross of St. Andrew, which is the Scottish flag, this is why there's an X on that, is because it's because of St. Andrew himself. And he's of course the patron saint of Scotland, but he's also the patron saint of fishermen, singers, pregnant women, and those that suffer from a sore throat. So there's honestly a saint for everything. But here you can see him with his cross, which I think is really fun. I love all these things, as you could tell. And this guy here, this is St. Jude. He has no attributes on him. And then it's also, look at the roosters yelling at him. So he doesn't have any attributes, but he looks pretty excited. Looks like maybe, he's more of a getting ready for Saturday Night Fever. And then there's St. Simon. He's seen with a book. He is one of the saints. There's less known about him. And all of these books, if you notice, they're all designed a little bit differently. But he is sometimes depicted cut in half because he was killed with a saw. A lot of times you'll see him in statues holding one of those long saw blades that's very, almost as tall as he is. And so a lot of times you'll see that, but this one you don't have that. This is St. Bartholomew. Some of these stories are a little bit graphic for the morning, so sorry about that. But St. Bartholomew, okay, we always think of the St. Bartholomew Day Massacre, but St. Bartholomew was the very first statue to be restored. So he was probably the one they did all of the, testing everything out on. And so he looks pretty good. He is holding that frighteningly large knife because that is how he, oh, good, Teresa. It's almost lunchtime. Hopefully I don't ruin your lunch. He was killed. He was skinned alive and beheaded. And so that is why he holds a knife. And he is the patron saint of butchers and leather makers, which is kind of gross. But he's also the patron saint of cheese makers and salt merchants. So I forgive the other ones on that one. If he is like, one of our favorites. Who doesn't love a guy that's in charge of cheese, right? This guy here is St. James the Less. he is holding on to, it's kind of hard to see. This is the when it was really patinaed, you could kind of see their details a little bit better. It'll be interesting to see what happens to these over time once they're back up on the roof and in their element. But he is holding there in his right hand, kind of underneath his toga, he is holding a club, which is what he was killed with. Sometimes he was also stoned and beaten with a club. Sometimes you see him in paintings holding or with stones around him. This guy here is this is Saint Paul. He was persecuting the Christians until he had a divine revelation and he converted and became a preacher. He was persecuted in 46 AD by Nero, and he was killed when a sword struck his neck, cut off his head. He rests on the sword. He has that there in his hand, and he's here stroking his beard, which is makes him much different than anyone else. But he is the patron saint of missionaries, which also makes sense. Sometimes these things that what they're the patron saint of is makes sense. There's one. If you saw the video or heard the podcast I did of the ladies of the Luxembourg, I can't remember which one of them, but she is one of the saints. She's the patron saint of women with angry husbands, which you just sometimes wonder, how some of these came to be, which is kind of fun. This is Saint Jacques, the Great. There's Saint John the Lesser and Saint Jacques the Great. Sorry, he was one of the he was at pretty much most of the important events of Christ's life. He was a preacher in Spain and was the first to be executed in 44 AD. And his name is given to the Compostela, which is, as you know, the path that you could take down from France down through. It's quite the pilgrimage, and he is also, you might know, because of scallops in France are called coquille Saint-Jacques, and that all kind of plays into that. And the emblem of the people that do the walk is the scallop shell. And so when you do it, you get a scallop shell at the end. I've never done it because I have a problem with bugs and outside outdoors. So, but I am still obsessed with it, and I think it's absolutely amazing. And if you have done it, let me know, because I think it's just absolutely amazing. But he is the patron saint of Spain and Seattle, veterinarians, pharmacists, and oyster fishermen. But I didn't even say he had anything to do with the scallop, other than it being, he should be the patron saint of, scallop fishermen, not just oyster fishermen. But he also there is with his walking cane, because it's all about the path down there. So this guy here, the only one that does not have a beard, is Saint Jean. He is the beardless one. He mirrors the same body type as Saint Simon. He was one of the most loyal apostles, and he is standing there holding a chalice because he was forced to drink poison, and he drank the poison from the cup, but it did not kill him. So that is why he has a cup with him. He is a patron saint of love, loyalty, friendship, authors, art dealers, and poison victims, of course. But I think that one's really cool too. But he's always easy to spot. So if you look on the facade of Notre Dame or other churches, you could always find Saint Jean, because he does not have a beard. Here I have these. I'm having to use this little scroll bar thing. Yes, and he was the youngest. I need to get like the, condensed version of the Bible and read it so I could read up on all of these stories, because some of them don't come back to me from Sunday school. But you can see just how gorgeous this museum is. And some of these pieces, it's some of these things you'll never, if you have tons of time in France and you go all over, you could go and see a lot of these different churches. But this is a really great way to get a chance to see all of these things. They have wonderful little plaques next to it that'll show you, here's a picture of the church, and have information on there. But look at that. That's just absolutely stunning. It's so cool to see all these. This is Saint Philip. He was martyred on a cross, and so he's holding a cross there in his hands. And then we have these four guys. So these four are the four evangelists. So some of these guys are on the roof twice, but each one of these, as you could kind of see from here, you see there's the smaller of the statues, of course, but they all kind of are in the same pose. So Deschamps and Viollet-le-Duc decided to follow the medieval depiction of the four evangelists, and that is why they are here as these living creatures. The four authors of the life of Christ each are represented by that by holding a book, and each of the books are a little bit different. So I just love the fact that each one of these things where, they just took care of like every single detail on these things. And it's just, if you have time, just like take your time in these places and really stop and just look at every part of it. In the background, that is a statue of a skeleton, and I always think it looks like he is taking a selfie. But the four of these have the same pose. They couldn't decide on where they were going to place them on, in what order they were placing them on the roof. And so, as I said earlier, at the last minute, they were literally changing them as they were being placed up on there. So the eagle represents Saint Jean. And then we have a couple of him. So you could see him from all these different angles, which is pretty cool. The angel is that of Saint Matthew. And then the lion is of Saint Mark. I'm using this little scroll bar thing here on, so I might be jumping through some pictures. But he is, I think I love the lion. Oh, I love the bull the most because I'm Taurus. But look at how cute he is. Isn't he cute? And you would never get the opportunity to ever see these things up close once they were on the roof or when they were back down. Oh, thanks so much, Chrissy. I'm glad I have people I could completely nerd out about this. So, and then there's the bull of the ox of St. Luke. And so some of these things, like if you go to the Madeleine Church, which is amazing, if you go on the outside of it, it is completely around the sides, and the back are the different saints. And there's tons of saints. You can see Saint Denis that still, when he still has his head, normally he's depicted holding his head, but you can see there's so many saints on the building, which I love to go look. And on the back side is where they have the saints, but then they have their the evangelists, and then they have like it'll have a lion below and a bull, and so that's really cool to see. So once if you're already, this devout Catholic and knew all these things, then, that's amazing. And I wish I had known about all these things before, but it's really fun for me to go and be like, oh, and then when I spot one and I'm like, oh, I know what those attributes are. I've always feel pretty great. Also that I remembered it, but there you could see, look at how cute he is. And then this guy here, they have him at the very back of this side of the space. And I love this one because this is St. Thomas, and St. Thomas was a patron saint of architects. Thomas was given the face of Viollet-le-Duc. So there is Viollet-le-Duc, who designed the beautiful, he added the gargoyles onto Notre Dame, and there's he redid in the flying buttresses, and so there's all these beautiful things that we know. So thankfully, when they decided they were keeping the roof back to the same way it was, I just was so relieved, because it's been this way for so long. It just needs to stay this way. And it was Viollet-le-Duc's vision. So I love this one also because he is turned and he's looking up. So he's looking up at his spire, admiring his great work. Another gentleman actually started the construction with him, with the architect that was a co-worker of Viollet-le-Duc, Lesu, and he died during the middle of the reconstruction. But his face is on St. Thomas that's at Sainte-Chapelle. So, they spread the love around with these guys. And you can see, I just love this. And he's also, his face and also of Lesu, they are on one of the faces on the facade of the kings of Judah. But you can see his name on here, which is so cool, on the ruler of the architect. But I love that he was looking up. And so you could get this great view back, and you could kind of see them all. So they were all kind of back, lining up into the center of the building. And there he is in this amazing photo of him looking back up there. And also, what's really cool is because it is casts of a lot of stuff, but then there's also pieces. So these are actually, these next two pictures are pieces that were removed from the chevet of the backside of Notre Dame. So they date back to the 13th century. And so there's a couple of these in here, which I just completely freak out when I see. But the guy there on the right looks like a monster. But they it's really cool because they have these actual pieces that are on there. And then these, they have a bunch of different slideshows. There's even a little place that you could sit, and they have these replays of the videos that from conferences that they did with the different architects talking about, you know, the plan and what they're going to do, you know, the different pieces, because they were in the middle of trying to do, you know, when that's why they had all that scaffolding up there. And, you know, it's either a lot of people ask me, you know, why it burned down. And a lot of people say it was electrical, but it's also a lot of people think that maybe it was a cigarette. But the scaffolding company, of course, is not going to say that because they weren't allowed to smoke up there. So if somebody had smoked, then it would not be looked upon very well for them. So they were actually going to start doing this work on the spire unfortunately, when the fire happened. But they have a bunch of different videos with the architects talking about it. And it's all in French. So keep that in mind. But I was just completely so ecstatic, just nerding out on all of it. But this was after the fire. This is when they were taking down the paintings in Notre Dame. There was the Lemaze, which we did, as I mentioned, a podcast that comes out next Monday, the 27th, about the different ways to see these amazing paintings in the churches of Paris. And I talk a little bit about the Lemaze. The Lemaze were donated every year on May 1st from the Goldsmith Guild of Paris. And there was 70 years that they did it, of these paintings. They were, a lot of times they were just, you know, amazing artists of the time, like Charles Lebrun. And every year they were donated, and they were called Lemaze because on May 1st, they came to the church, they hung it on a pillar. And then it's all these different, of course, biblical stories. And then they would have, at the time of the fire, Notre Dame had 13 there. A lot of the other ones have been scattered. Some are completely missing. There's a museum in the north of Paris. It has 14 of them that I'm going to in the spring. I need to go up there so I could see all of them because I'm obsessed with them. I found the most amazing book at the Louvre Library that I bought that's all about them and has every detail about them and where they are now, because I've been trying to compile that information. It's almost impossible. And when I found this book that was way more expensive for a book than it should have been, but it is one of my most precious things that I think I have because I absolutely love it. It has pictures of all of them, but they took them down. And all of them, nothing was damaged because they were in the side chapels, but they desperately needed cleaning. Up until this time, they were so dark and just covered with probably decades and decades and decades of candle soot and everything else. But you can see them here. And this is in some of the slideshows that they have. I'll show you the book, actually. I'll grab it here in a second. And here's another one. And I just saw a story on French News the other day where I thought they had been saying that they took these all to the Louvre, but they are actually somewhere just south of Paris now. And they had a short little story, and I'll see if I can find the clip and share it. It is again in French, but they are restoring them, and you could see some of these people actually working on them to get them all. Hopefully, the plan was to have them on display in the Louvre. The last time I saw it said 2022. So at the time when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, that's so far away. But now here we are. but it's pretty cool. And then these last two pictures, if you look at this, this is a picture, a photograph taken around 1841. And if you look in there through the center door, there is the Trumeau is missing, and also all the kings are missing. So, and there's no spire, which I thought was amazing. And they just had you could see that this poor picture is not doing so good. They do also right now, and it's going to be going for quite some time, I think into next year. In front of Notre Dame, there's the crypt below, and there is the architectural crypt, or archaeological crypt, which is really cool to go see. They currently have a exhibit going on about Viollet-le-Duc and Victor Hugo. And so it has a whole bunch of really fantastic photos and things about what Viollet-le-Duc did to save it, and obviously Victor Hugo did to save it. And then here is this picture that was done after the renovation. So you can see on there everything. Hang on, let me grab the book. So here is the book, and it is absolutely humongous. And I will I'll see if I can find a link to this online. But it is of all of the maze of Notre Dame. You can see there are a few of the maze that are in the Louvre that you could actually see today. But there is this huge list of them. And so in the book, it has like tons and tons of photos of it. But then where I really get to nerd out is back here, where it has like all of the super minute information about each one of them. It has pictures of sketches that they use to work on it, but they have them where these are now. There's the big list of all of them. You could sometimes, there is a list that you could find on Wikipedia of all of the paintings. For things like that, if you go to the Wikipedia .fr, you could a lot of times, oh, look, here's the same exact picture. If you go to wikipedia.fr and look for these things, sometimes it's a little better, especially something like that that's pretty kind of obscure, that they're probably thinking that in English people probably don't care so much. But I mean, this book is like amazing. I literally sit here and just like, oh, I just love it so much. But I had to have it because I have a notebook myself that I have been filling up with all the information I'm trying to find. But there is, if you read French or want to use, you could use the Google Translate with the photo. There is some other really amazing books, and I'll see if I could find links for some of them. But these, and of course I get all of these in Paris because you can't get these things here. But this is another amazing book about the building of Notre Dame. This isn't really about the renovation as much, but it's really, really amazing. That has just like tons and tons of photos and architectural plans and everything in here. This is just one of the coolest things. I love all these. So it's if you are in Paris, and some of these I find the Louvre has a big bookstore that's my kryptonite that I buy. If you could see this bed behind me, it's still covered with stacks and stacks of books that I brought back that I haven't even put away, and I'm leaving in 7 days to buy more, I'm sure. So, but it's really cool. There's also some that are like this is the actual description of the construction done by Viollet-le-Duc, and it has my love, Philippe Villeneuve, as he writes a little forward to it. This is, I think, the same exact book. That happens a lot too. But this one's great because it actually has a bunch of the drawings in there of everything. Here's amazing photo of the spire. See, I could just stay here with you guys and just play show and tell all day long. The front door. So this is the Porte de la Vierge, the Virgin. And if you could tell, this is the one, it has the lines over here. And I need to actually read this book. Yesterday I was just looking for information, but I've always wondered why that is on that one door. And one person told me it's because it's a little smaller than door on the far right of St. Anne. So they did that to make it look bigger, but I don't believe that. So I'm going to get to the bottom of that. And there's also a statue on either side, on the north and the south side of the towers, that I've never been able to find out who it is. And it's going to be like, I'm going to go to my grave until looking for that name, I think, of who those statues are. But yeah, so that's all of it. That is all of this wonderful little story of Notre Dame. I could definitely do this again, and we could go through the doors, because I could give you the story of each one of the doors. You have all the doors on the side, and the spire and everything. So I've actually wanted to do some podcast episodes about Notre Dame, but I know that it would probably turn into like 5 or 6 podcasts, depending on what stuff is inside. I am so incredibly grateful and happy that I spent probably hundreds of hours inside and documented like literally every single chapel. They had these amazing plaques there that would say, who designed the stained glass window, and it would say, so-and-so, and then après, the dessin Viollet-le-Duc, the designs of Viollet-le-Duc, and then sometimes it would say they were 13th century. These plaques would also have the names of the paintings and the statues, and if it was a tomb in there. And I have took photos of like literally every square inch of that place, and I have one book journal that's just filled with nothing but history about Notre Dame. So I am so thankful. It still makes me sad to look at pictures of the interior and know that we can't go in there, but we're only maybe 2 years away from being able to go inside. They want to have it open April 16th, 2024. Is that right? Yeah, 5 years. And that would be 5 years and a day. After the fire, they want to have it open April 16th to do a mass in there. So I am I'll keep our fingers crossed. I think as soon as they get the roof put on, because other than that, the interior really wasn't damaged. So thank goodness. But I think it was Saint-Geneviève. She was protecting it. I think it was all Saint-Geneviève. So, but thank you guys so much. I will get this put together. If you don't get my newsletter yet, you could subscribe by just going to my website, ClaudineHemingway.com, and I'll put information, a lot of the information that we talked about today. So when you get back to Notre Dame, or you get back to Paris and please go to the Architecture Museum. It's so amazing. There's also pieces from the Arc de Triomphe. You also have amazing views of the Eiffel Tower, and there's multiple floors, and there's even like contemporary designs. There's this room that's just all stained glass. It's just stunning. It's a really, really cool museum to go see, and nobody goes. So you will have the whole thing to yourself. But thank you guys all so much for joining. If you wanted to leave a little tip at all, you could do it on my PayPal or my Venmo at ClaudineHemingway.com. And of course, I'd appreciate that for some champagne money when I get back to Paris. So 1 week from this moment, I will be on a plane, God willing, Saint-Geneviève willing. And so hopefully I will be back there. So there won't be a video next Sunday, but I will be doing ones from Paris, of course, and I will be popping up and doing a bunch of other ones. I am going to be doing a couple that are just for my Patreon people. So make sure if you want to, you can sign up for my Patreon. It's as low as $5 a month. So we'll do some videos for you from there too. There's cool things happening. We have the Feast Day of Saint-Geneviève. We have the Epiphany with the galette de roi cake, which I can't wait for. It is also the 100th anniversary of Hemingway moving into their apartment. Tomorrow, the episode of Paris History of Rebecca Hemingway on the V Creative Podcast is about the 100th anniversary. Tomorrow was 100 years ago tomorrow that Hemingway and Hadley arrived in Paris for the very first time. So together as a couple. So 100 years ago, it's amazing. So on January 9th was the 100th year anniversary that they moved into the apartment on Carnel-le-Moine. So I will do a video that day from there all about that. So join me. And if there's things you want to see in Paris, shoot me a message. But thank you guys all so, so much for being here today. And I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful Christmas. And I will see you very soon. Thank you all.